Holy smokers, guys, you better find a way to change your DNA or pay your family members to stay off genetic testing websites, because the times of your DNA being private information is getting thrown out the door. Back in April of 2019, I created a video called The Risk of DNA Testing in 2019. I'll put a card up above here. Hopefully I'm pointing in the right direction, because I seem to point in the wrong direction all the time. We'll see how many videos it takes to point in the right direction. If I'm pointing in the wrong direction, leave a comment down below to have a prediction on how many videos I can mess this up. In that video, I talked about 6 different risks of submitting your information to DNA testing websites, and one of those risks was law enforcement. Back then I talked about law enforcement getting more involved in using the DNA information on those sites to do investigations. Sure enough, what do you know, there's an article on the New York Times that came out November 5th, 2019. I'll post a link in the description down below for you guys to check that out if you want to read into that more. But that article talks about a judge in Florida approving a warrant to request genetic testing information from GEDmatch. The first time a judge has ever approved such a warrant. So today I'll be talking about that case and how it applies to you and what you guys can do to protect yourself. This case is a really huge deal, because a lot of the genetic information testing websites have pledged to keep that genetic information private. Those sites include 23andMe, genealogy.com, and this GEDmatch.com genetic testing site. In the past, law enforcement used this genetic information from these genetic testing websites to help trace down suspects for crimes and to help trace down victims involved in those crimes. But a group of prominent genealogists forced these genetic testing sites to lock down what information they were sharing about their users. In my opinion, they did this because if bad word got out, it would harm these genetic testing sites' business. So GEDmatch.com changed its policy back in May of 2019, forcing law enforcement agencies to identify themselves when they're doing searches and not allowing them to do searches on just anybody on their site. People had to specifically opt in to be able to do those searches. 185,000 of the 1.3 million people on GEDmatch opted in, and so police officers were able to search on those 185,000 people, but the other out of the 1.3 million people, they couldn't do anything with. Well, law enforcement, of course, was not happy about this, because they had to work a lot harder to be able to find suspects and things like that, and they couldn't spend as much time eating all those donuts, drinking that coffee, sitting in their vehicle and taking a nap all day. So, of course, they wanted to get this changed. Finally, they don't have as much opportunity to watch my YouTube videos and smash that like button like you guys should be doing. So, Detective Michael Fields of the Orlando Police Department was able to get a Florida judge in July to approve a warrant so that he could do an investigation on the case of a serial rapist that assaulted several women several decades ago. Previously, he had used GEDmatch to find the suspect of a 2001 murder case that he spent 6 years trying to solve. Back then, he wasn't required to get a warrant, but now he has to, and he did get that warrant. The sad thing about this to me is that warrant bypasses the whole privacy thing. Those users that didn't opt in to having their information shared now are forced to be opted in, and to me personally, it should not be that way. Users should have to opt their information in, or at least be notified that their information is being used for an investigation. The people that are using this website don't expect their information to be used for other purposes. They only expect it to be used for benefiting themselves, and that's the big problem I have with this. If you had a big warning on these sites when you sign up for them to identify the 6 different risks that I talk about and some of the other risks that they're using to share this information, you probably would have never got this DNA testing result done in the first place, or your family members wouldn't have done that. But they don't list that, and if they do, it's in some big long legal document that nobody's ever going to read anyway. So this investigator, he has full reign on the GEDmatch database to search for whatever the F he wants about these people to gain more information. He hasn't found any lead suspects at this time. DNA experts project that the smaller site of the DNA testing sites was used to see how the public would react. If the public doesn't have a strong reaction, or there's no lawsuits that come from this, they're projecting that law enforcement will then use the top 2 DNA testing websites, which are 23andme.com and ancestry.com, which have 15 million users and 10 million users compared to the 1.3 million users that this testing website has. So obviously they can gather a lot more information, but they're just kind of wanting to use this as a testing ground to see how the public's going to react and if there's any legal ramifications that will come from this, and then move on. So you guys might be thinking,
well, Levi, I've never submitted any genetic testing information to 23andMe, genealogy.com, or any of these websites. Like, I'm good to go. I'm gonna be safe, Levi.
Well, unfortunately, you have family members that are related to you that share the same DNA as you, and if they submit their information to those DNA testing websites, guess what? Your information is out there and you don't have any control over it. And especially the more and more of your family members that do that, they can get almost an exact match of your DNA. So yeah, you don't have any control. The best thing to protect yourself in this situation is 1, to hope your family members haven't submitted this information, and then 2, you go out there and talk to all of your family members, post this video on social media, post my video on social media about the risk of using DNA testing services, and hopefully they could see it and not sign up for those services. You could also try to pay them off, bribe them not to be on there, or just yell at them very hard and maybe they'll listen. The other thing is obviously don't sign up for those sites yourselves. If you plan on being a criminal or are currently a criminal, then you definitely want to make sure you're doing this, because it makes it a lot easier for law enforcement to trace you. And if you're planning on being a criminal, you might want to check to see if any of your family members have done this before you become one. Alright, so just because a Florida judge ruled that this is okay for a police officer to go and be able to search an entire genetic database, even though the users haven't consented that they're able to be able to do that, doesn't mean that this precedent is going to be set in stone. I have a feeling there's going to be some legal challenges in this situation. This is probably going to rise up through the courts because somebody's probably going to sue, and I'm guessing it'll probably go all the way up to the Supreme Court for them to decide. How that case turns out, I don't know, but the way that privacy is here in the United States, you can only assume that it's probably going to be allowed, because the way that our privacy situation is we generally don't have privacy in the United States. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out. What will impact this case is how angry people get about this case. If there's a lot of public backlash about this, then that will make it much harder for law enforcement to be able to do this. So it'll definitely be interesting in the future to see how this goes, but I have a feeling this is going to be okay, unfortunately. And you know, there's 5 other things that I talk about that are huge risks to you guys. I highly recommend that you watch my video that I'll tag up above, just so you guys can get a general sense of what can happen to you guys if you submit your genetic testing information, or if your family submits their information to one of these genetic testing sites. Unfortunately, I knew something like this was coming, and I believe it's only going to get worse and worse. So be careful what you're submitting to these genetic testing websites and what your family is submitting. Do everything that you can to prevent them from submitting their information. Obviously, there's benefits to those sites. If you have a genetic disease or something like that, it would be good to know. But other than that, I really don't see a purpose for those sites at this time, and I won't be using those personally until there's a guaranteed statement that says that my genetic information can't be shared for other purposes. And I strongly encourage any of my family members out there to not share their genetic information with these testing sites so that you guys don't put your family at risk. So I hope you guys learned a lot from this video. If you like this content, make sure to smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell to help promote my content up in the YouTube algorithm, to help more people like you have terrible privacy things like this and cybersecurity incidents from happening to them, or helping them reduce their risk at those things happening to them. So thank you for watching, guys, and have a great day.